For Sunday, December 14th, you've found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, Lieutenant Governor Cagle says the T word. Congress passes a Cromnibus spending bill, and there will be a new trial for Burl Ellis. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And good day. We're glad you could be with us as we move toward the new year and the coming of the General Assembly. We start to look at the issues that body may be confronting. And as we've mentioned, transportation is a key one. Well, that took a twist this past week with the legislature having what they call their biennial meeting in Athens. It's basically to educate new legislators. But Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, a Republican, said the T word. He said transit, not transportation. Very pointed. And I think it sets off the debate by simply using that one word, because Governor Deal was kind of hemming and hawing on that deal.
Well, that's right. We had this transportation summit, as you point out, in Athens at this conclave last week, and there were several trial balloons that were put out. Transit was being one. The other one, as we know, was an interesting concept whereby you would have a 1 cent upping of our sales tax, perhaps with a cutting of the property tax. That was very vague. And then you had what we've discussed, perhaps a hiking of the gas tax. So there's a flurry among all the Republicans. Now, of course, the T word, the tax word, raising the taxes.
There you go. That's the T word.
That's the T word.
No, I look at it a little bit differently. I think they're going to have to do something tax-wise.
Right.
If nothing else, they've got to take the fourth penny of the gasoline tax, take it out of the general fund, and put it in road construction. But Keith Golden, the DOT chief, said, look, there isn't any federal money coming down the pike. They are going to have to look at something bold, and to get Democratic votes, which they'll need, it's going to have to use the T word, transit. The Democrats, of course, will vote for any tax scheme that's put out there.
Oh, please.
But they will. They always do. But transit is the key. And Lieutenant Governor Cagle was saying, we've got the spine in MARTA. It's already in place.
Yeah.
It's mostly paid for, right?
Right, that's right.
So I think that's some progress.
It depends on what the specifics are, as we all know. It was all very vague.
I think that it's great that you've got Republicans over there finally acknowledging the fact that we can't continue doing what we're doing, that we need new infusions of revenue and capital in order to address our transportation needs, which are growing not just in the metropolitan area,
put a number
but
on
across the state. And they put a number on it. That number is $1 billion a year, raising $1 billion a year.
Now, the governor
and you're exactly right. We can't rely on federal sources as we have in the past, and so that means that you're going to have to be looking at public-private partnerships. But public's going to have to put up its share in those public-private partnerships, and that's going to mean the T word, higher taxes. But it is good to hear that Republicans are also talking about transit, whether it's the Lieutenant Governor, whether it's Mayor Sandy Springs talking about transit as he did the other week. We've got to have that conversation.
Jeff, there's another T word too, and you all know it, and that is toll. Now, when you talk about public-private partnerships, I think a lot of people do like that, and we're already having some developing on the interstates and having that extra lane that we've talked about, and if you want to get into a faster lane, you pay a toll. So that's a good form of revenue. So you're right, it depends on what kind of revenue we're talking about.
Right. And also, one good thing would be maybe finally MARTA would become a metropolitan transit authority, as it is so named, where you would have all the counties participating and even some funding from the state.
The key to that is the tie-ins with Greta and all that have been slowly in the works. Now, all this infrastructure talk, we have a rule on the Georgia Gang, no reading. Can't read, right?
Okay.
You going to break it?
I'm going to break it.
All right.
Because I think as the Republicans and the Democrats talked about this, there was a blow to them in the form of Richard Anderson, the chairman of Delta Airlines. He's from Minneapolis, isn't he? He's not from around here. But he said that Georgia shouldn't be chicken about tackling tough solutions, and they should stand up to legislative leaders. And he said, if that means raising taxes to fund our roads, it means we have to raise taxes. Well, I got a starting point. That fuel exemption, the largest tax exemption in Georgia that Delta Airlines holds. How dare he, when he's a welfare recipient of state tax dollars, take a lead in this?
Well, that's right. I just saw in the Wall Street Journal this past Friday where their profits are soaring. Take away the tax break if he wants to talk this way.
I think that you should talk. I think that when Richard Anderson steps out like that, that and says we shouldn't be chicken, he means exactly that, and he's willing to sacrifice that in order for us to move forward on these transportation initiatives, which are far more important at this point. That was done at a time when Delta was on its knees, and it is, as you say, Phil, no longer. And it's time to get rid of it.
In addition, the price of gasoline and fuel has come down tremendously, hasn't it, Dick?
Yes,
you haven't remarked on that.
It has, because of American entrepreneurship,
Yes.
Okay.
because of fracking, because of American ingenuity. A president who said, we will not drill, we will not build refineries, and American ingenuity has lowered
in spite
the
of
gas
Barack
prices.
Obama.
That's right.
And
I think it's
because
a
of
matter
Barack
of
Obama, because he
supply.
has
Well, it is.
had, well, he had several many energy initiatives that have come to fruition, and that was part of the
Solyndra?
process too.
That was a good one.
No, not Solyndra, but there are many solar projects that are taking place.
Let me do a
And doing
footnote
well.
to that.
Presidents don't control oil prices.
Let me do a footnote,
No,
though, to
they
the
don't.
One thing.
transportation.
Let me just, before you do that, I want to know if Richard Anderson of Delta has called Governor Deal and said, you know what, talk to your guys, I'll give back the tax break.
Don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had, or if he's willing to,
I
in
don't
order
know.
to have
Go
this
ahead, Phil.
conversation
I
about
cut you off.
transportation.
Well, just a footnote on the whole transportation thing. As we see this roll out into the session next month, the new General Assembly session, I'd like to know if the Republicans fully understand they're playing with fire, and you touched on it, because if they need some Democrat votes, whatever this plan is going to be, what's the trade-off? The Democrats are going to want something. And did the people vote November 4th, Republicans, to cut deals with liberal Democrats? I don't think so.
Well, speaking
let's
of
hope
cutting,
they got elected to get something done to benefit the entire state and not just some people's pocketbooks.
well, speaking of cutting deals, look what happened in Washington late last week. John Boehner managed to shepherd a spending bill through the House, one vote margin on a procedural question.
Right.
It's called the Cromnibus, something Congressman Tom Price of Georgia came up with, which is a continuing resolution for everything but Homeland Security. And in that case, the funding for Homeland Security and therefore President Obama's amnesty plan
It's not an amnesty.
will be limited to February.
That's right.
And then when the Republican majority gets in, they can figure out how they want to
They're
defund
gonna
that
have
amnesty
fight
program.
again.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, the world turned upside down last week with this Cromnibus vote in the House of Representatives. The Obama administration, I had to rub my eyes in disbelief, sided with the GOP Republican leadership
In the House,
in
yeah.
the House, and
Right.
was attacking Obama's most loyal person, Nancy Pelosi. I got popcorn, sat back, and enjoyed the show. The liberals were told to shut up. There were some good conservative reforms.
It wasn't quite that clear cut. You had Paul Vitter over in Louisiana teaming up with a Democrat from Ohio,
David
saying
Vitter.
that David Vitter, thank you, saying that these financial regulations that we're repealing are outrageous and we shouldn't be doing it. So you had the Tea Party
You're talking
lining up with.
Dodd-Frank. They wanted to save Dodd-Frank, which is the worst bill around.
No, it's not. And that-
Well,
but
it
did
just
make some
depends on whether or
interesting-
not you're one of those four, banks that do 93% of the derivatives
you've
trading
even
in the United
criticized the
States.
overregulation of Dodd-Frank. I remember you
Let's
saying
point
that.
out that in that massive budget bill is extra funding for the CDC
Right.
to fight Ebola, a substantial amount of money,
Wow.
and a tiny smidgen of money to get started on the dredging of the Port of Savannah.
I think that there was enough to go around, and $1.1 trillion. It doesn't even fund the country for a full year. It's another continuing resolution. We've got an inept Congress that cannot do its job.
Oh, but a good one's
of
coming
funding
in.
the governor. Of funding the government. But there was enough in there for the president to concede on that very important
we
point
have
of
we have to
financial
get out. I think we
regulation.
should say that this is the first budget since Obama became president, isn't it?
It is. In fact, a lot of commentators are saying what you just said, and that is that the system is beginning to work again. The Republicans, whether you like this or not, were forcing the Democrats and the Democrat Senate and Harry Reid to finally consider a budget.
All right,
Well,
we've got to make.
let's point
They've
this
been
out. This was the
passing
first
continuous budget.
bipartisan effort that we've seen in a long time in Congress, and it was truly bipartisan.
That's my
Right.
point. Now, look, we didn't get to the retirement of Saxby Chambliss and the wonderful speech he made. We can do that perhaps when we come back after the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at myfoxatlanta.com.
This past week marked a changing of the guard for Georgians in Washington, D.C. It's hard for me to believe, but Senator Saxby Chambliss ended his effectively ended his term this week, gave a farewell speech on the floor of the Senate after 18 years in that body and years in Congress before that. I thought he was particularly eloquent, but what I really enjoyed was the speech Johnny Isakson gave praising Chambliss and how they were joined at the hip and they fought all the fights together. I just thought it was terrific, a show of solidarity between those two men who, in my mind, are very different.
Well, it was a great milestone. We do salute Saxby Chambliss. I think what's interesting, too, if you look at constituent service, how you help Georgians, regardless of their politics. Those two offices, I know firsthand, really reached out and coordinated together to help, whether it was the farmer getting a loan or a veteran trying to get help from the VA, and so we have to salute them.
Chambliss also took to the floor to condemn Senator Dianne Feinstein, whom I thought he worked pretty well with on that Intelligence Committee, but over the Democratic release of the Democratic report on enhanced interrogation techniques by our CIA. And we're not going to get into that. That's for the national shows.
That's the report that Vice President Cheney labeled, quote, a bunch of crap, unquote.
Well, and I think Dick Cheney is entitled to say that.
Well, Darth Vader would say something like that.
So let's turn to local news. There's no way to say this politely. The streetcar still isn't running. What is up with this?
Yeah, that was pretty polite. No.
Well, it's politer than Cheney was.
It isn't, but it's going to be running soon, and it's going to be a terrific tourist attraction, which is what it's intended to be.
All right, I want to turn to you. It's what, about 10 days late? That's the streetcar?
Over budget, delayed.
Yeah.
Another boondoggle.
2 wrecks.
Well,
we didn't even mention those.
You know, I mean, you all consider the Beltline a boondoggle. I mean, you know, all of the good things that are happening in the city of Atlanta.
The streetcar goes.
It's growing. It's growing in population. Do you realize that for the first time in a century, urban centers are growing faster than the suburbs?
I think it's an interesting trend. Now you're hitting on something, and we have to ask why. But the only caveat is be careful.
Millennials don't want to commute.
Be careful of the law enforcement. That's going to be the key.
Well, that's exactly right. If you know, the events of the last month or two are any indication, be careful of law enforcement is exactly right.
Alexis, let me turn to you. It's on again, off again, this business of Tyler Perry, the movie mogul, acquiring 300 and some odd acres at Fort McPherson.
Right.
Midweek, it looked like he'd pulled out. Then Kassim got the governor to change a board member out. That was amazing.
Some bipartisan efforts going on again there.
They just yanked some poor board member to get the vote they wanted?
Well, that is the way it was presented in the news reports, that is exactly what happened. But I think it's very good that Tyler Perry is still interested, and he is committed to, you know, putting in some funding there to expand his studio as his empire.
He's already got a huge tract out in Douglas County, don't forget.
That's true. So he may do both, but I think this is really good for the city because it's a part of the city, a south side of the city on the MARTA transit line. It could be a wonderful development for
I agree.
Another tourist attraction.
I agree, and also Georgia's become the place to go from California, especially to have movie productions, TV, movie studios. We've talked on the gang this past year of 4 that have come in.
Pinewood down in Fayette.
That's exactly right.
And it's not a coincidence. It's because of Georgia's favorable tax laws when it comes to the film industry. That's why they're coming here, and they're going to continue to come here. It is a huge investment. It's going to bring a lot of jobs and economic activity to that side of town. And so, you know,
it was the dream of former State Senator Mitch Seabaugh. And he's got to be smiling at what's happened in the state because that was his gospel for quite a long time. Phil, you must have been unhappy to see Mayor Kassim Reed go to a national immigration summit with big city mayors to welcome illegal immigrants.
Yes, I was surprised that Kassim Reed went that far. You know, yes, we're a welcoming city, but, you know, let's have a legal workforce. Let's welcome people from around the world.
That's exactly why he went to the summit, because they wanted to talk about the president's executive order that
It's illegal executive order.
It's not illegal. It defers the deportation of illegal.
Well, as I'm trying to explain, that's right.
Those who are parents
deferring.
of children who are U.S. citizens.
They're still illegal, Alexis. It's a deferral. Now, it'd be interesting to see what happens in the next administration, but it's the wrong signal. We had this surge, as you well know, of illegals coming into our schools and burdening our healthcare system just this past year. And here here's
doing
Kasim
jobs
Reed
and paying taxes,
saying, "Oh, come on in
buying
here.
things,
and
Uncle
consuming.
Sap will pay
Let
for
me change the
everything."
subject real quickly.
do.
This is a story to watch. I noticed that former Atlanta policemen were questioning the city pension board over that huge lump sum payment made to the police chief, George Turner, and as to whether that will hike his pension benefits. The city says no. The police union representatives say yes. There's where we stand for now. So just keep an eye on it. And after we taped last week, we learned, unfortunately for our deadline purposes, that the Woodruff Foundation was giving $38 million to the Woodruff Arts Center. Well, that about solves that symphony problem, doesn't it?
Well, not altogether, but it certainly helps a great deal because I think, what is it, $8 million of it was designated specifically for the Atlanta Symphony
And I don't think
Orchestra.
that it's any coincidence that it came after a deal had been made with the musicians.
Well, that's my point. All right, we've got to get out. When we come back, it looks like the city of Kennesaw is going to reverse its city council decision on whether to allow a mosque in town. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at myfoxatlanta.com.
A couple of weeks ago, the city council in Kennesaw rejected the right of some Muslims to open a mosque in that city. And there was quite an outcry, and it does seem counter to American principles of religious freedom.
It is.
And so
Yes.
now cooler heads apparently have been working behind the scenes, and it's our understanding that Monday night the mayor and council will vote to grant the permit for the mosque. I don't think there's anything else needs to be said.
Well, I would have loved to have heard what the county attorney's reasoning was when they voted no, and he advised them to vote no the first time, a 4-to-1 vote, and then now, why are we switching? And also, is this the head of this mosque a radical, or is he a moderate? I have
Well, I don't
never
think
saw
that's,
that.
That's a tough. I don't think that's our question to
Right.
ask. I
Thank
really
you.
don't.
Thank
I
you.
don't either.
I don't know. It's-
Well,
I-
zoning was the big issue.
Maybe
no?
the FBI can ask. but-
If they have consistent zoning laws, I could understand it, but it sounded like they were inconsistent.
All right, staying in Cobb County, I thought it was very cool this week. The Braves released a bunch of drawings of the new complex, and that thing gets, the drawings anyway, get bigger and bigger and
More
bigger.
dramatic and
it
more-
looks like a dramatic, almost new city there in Cobb County.
It
And they
does.
also said that, and this is something I'd argued, if you recall, that the new stadium will have more access points than Turner Field. Everybody's saying you won't be able to get there. Well, the Braves are saying that there are 17 access points.
15 more than Turner Field.
15 more than Turner, exactly, 15 more than
Well,
Turner Field.
I'm still
we shall see,
curious.
but there's like one way to get to the
Right.
17.
Right, exactly right. I-75.
That's right.
That's the case.
Thank you for pointing that out. And
right.
remember the bridge that was supposed to go from the Cumberland Mall area over to the stadium?
Yes.
And you remember Commission Chairman Tim Lee says, gee, we don't know how we're going to pay for that, but we want the bridge.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder when they're going to move back. You know, we've seen this with others. You know, with
Yeah.
other teams, they've moved to the suburbs and then they've moved back to their central cities.
Yeah,
I wonder when the
Detroit,
Braves will move back.
your Detroit
When do you
teams
think?
all
5
know.
years? 10 years?
Yeah.
Well, now here's an odd one. I had been waiting for the district attorney of DeKalb County, Robert James, to make a statement as to whether he was going to retry Burl Ellis. Instead, the announcement came from Superior Court Judge Courtney Johnson, who said that Burl Ellis will have a retrial June 1st. That's a long ways away. That's right in the last 6 months of his term. Is the delay in the trial to allow continued plea bargaining, negotiations? What do you make of it, or is it just the judge's calendar? I don't know.
Playing out the clock.
I think that part of it is playing out the clock, and I also think, as we discussed last week, that the DA wanted a new jury. I mean, he almost got it was a hung jury the last time. He almost got
Well,
a
he's going
charge.
to get
so
one.
he
He's
wants
going to get a new jury. Unfortunately, he's going to have the same witnesses, and I don't know if they're going to have a surge in either popularity or credibility between now and June 1.
In the meantime, the seat occupied by Lee May on the DeKalb County Commission remains vacant. Nancy Jester, the new commissioner, abstained in the vote. It kind of surprised me.
Well,
That
I
surprised
thought
me, too.
that
Come on, I
that
thought
was
that's what-
terrible.
Yeah, why
I thought that was
that's why
terrible.
She was elected to make the
And
commission
her
be able
big
to
theme
function.
was, "I'm going to take charge in government and
Make the
Yeah,
tough,
she's
tough
been on.
decisions.
She'd been there for what, a week?
20
I think
minutes.
that she wanted to. Yeah, she wanted to give
No,
herself
she'd
an
been there a
opportunity.
day.
A day. She wanted to give herself an opportunity to learn the
But Jeff,
facts. And
this has
and
been
make
going
an
on for
informed
weeks.
vote.
The person to be the replacement, we've known about this
for
I know,
weeks.
but it's going to come back around, and she'll have an opportunity.
Now, in the
to have
meantime,
her say.
Michael Thurman, the school superintendent at DeKalb, decided to weigh into that dispute. Well, it's not really a dispute, whether the issue of whether Druid Hills should be annexed into the city of Atlanta. Thurmond was adamant that it would cause much higher taxes and would be of no benefit to the people of Druid Hills. Now, I was contacted by Together in Atlanta, the group, and they didn't like some of the things I'd said. I was wrong on one thing. They're not going to be using City of Atlanta water and sewer.
Right.
They would stay with DeKalb. But they told me that
I don't know
for
that
a
they have that option.
$400,000 home, the tax increase would only be $518. Their words.
Unless like you're a senior, and you lose that exemption that Superintendent Thurman was talking about that would raise
I
your
don't
taxes
get that exemption.
$4,000 a year. I mean, we're talking about a 200% increase in taxes for people who live in that area. But that's really not, for me, about taxes. I'd love to see the footprint of the city grow and for us to stop this balkanization. The reason that they want to leave is because they're charter cluster shopping. They couldn't get it out of the DeKalb County school system. They think that they can get it from Maria Kirchstarfen, and I'm not so. And the DeKalb and the Atlanta Board of Education, and I'm not so sure that they can. And this whole notion,
in general, Atlanta
of
is friendly.
resegregating our public school system with taxpayer dollars should be troublesome
Jeff.
to all of us.
Jeff, the fact is Atlanta, believe it or not, the city of Atlanta public schools are much more charter friendly and friendly to school choice.
Well, in fact,
and
they're
so I think they would
making an
allow
effort
them
to make the entire system a charter system, as
I
Fulton
don't
County
think that
did.
means anything.
Fulton
DeKalb's
County
talking
did.
about that
Well,
too.
everybody is under state law. You've got to make a choice between now and I think the next 18 months or so.
But you sympathize with parental choice. You do realize
I
what
do
he's saying.
sympathize with parental choice. I don't think that it's wise for an area like Druid Hills to go out and start shopping around so that they can become a charter cluster, and that's exactly what they're doing, and that's the reason that they're pursuing this.
All right,
and I'm not saying that we're resegregating on the basis of race. They may be resegregating on the basis of parental priority or
Well,
parents
they
who
have a right.
are engaged in their children's
sound
education.
like me.
But it's still
Well, they have a right.
We gotta get
resegregation,
out.
and it's doing it with public dollars.
They have a
and
right
it's
to
unconscionable.
shop around, as you call it.
Well, the fact is DeKalb is not choice friendly. DeKalb voted down the charter
DeKalb
cluster.
has more charter schools than any other system. 20% of DeKalb is already under charter
Why
schools.
wouldn't they let them have a charter system? That's the key fact here. And they
Because they
deserve
were
that.
moving toward a charter system.
And what you're going to
The entire
result in is
district.
independent school systems because you monkeyed around and didn't allow the charters. All right, when we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for this week's winners and losers.
In case we run out of time, I'm going to proclaim a consensus loser for the group. That would be the Clayton County NAACP, which has decided to give their highest award to one Mary Bird for her years of service. Little problem, she's in prison for embezzlement and won't be there. All right, Phil, go ahead.
No, I agree. You would think character might be one of the criteria for that. I've got two winners, and one of them is some excitement going on in the city of Atlanta. You talked about that a little bit earlier, Jeff, and that is Buckhead, Atlanta, that new retail center. I was over there this past week, looked around, and they're touting it as the Rodeo Drive of Atlanta, so check it out. And secondly, I want to make my winners law enforcers. Is law enforcement perfect in this area, in this state, in this country? No. But I tell you what, they give their lives, they put it on the line. Sometimes we've had a lot of hundreds
and
killed.
we had two DeKalb policemen shot Friday morning.
As we taped on Friday, two DeKalb were shot. And so there's been a lot of propaganda against the police. So I say they're winners.
Alexis, talk fast.
Okay, all right. I want to salute Bernice King and Judy Forte. Bernice runs the King Center. Judy is the superintendent of the National Park Service King Historic Site. They opened an exhibit this week on the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's Nobel Peace Prize. It's a wonderful thing. It shows the stiff competition that he was up against with his nomination. And Bernice put on a series of programs looking back and looking forward as in terms of world peace and what we can do to bring it about if we can. And then we lost 3 citizens, pillars of the community this week. I'm going to talk really fast. Doug Greenwell, who ran the Atlanta Project for Jimmy Carter, Dixie Mabry, a longtime educator and principal, and Alice Johnson, who was a longtime social justice fighter.
Jeff, talk real fast.
Blue Cross Blue Shield for knocking Grady out of their network, and Phil Gingrey, who got his hand slapped on the way out of Congress.
All right.
Losers.
Oh, you
both.
got 2 losers.
Losers both.
I've got one winner. The folks in the community who got together to raise money for the employees of the OK Cafe, the famous breakfast place at West Paces Ferry and Northside Drive. They raised a bunch of money for those folks, and I thought it was a nice thing and thoughtful thing to do. And we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing on today's program.